All right, we'll get started here. Wanted to go over, we went over maxims last night, and there were a lot of people that were inquiring today about what I meant about the common law being part of Roman civil law. So let's get into it and break it down, because in such trying times throughout our great nation, I find that it's the lack of knowledge and the belief in others that is causing such strife, right? I mean, let's face it. The politicians don't care about you, all right? You're just a number to them, okay? And they don't know your name. They don't understand where you've come from. They don't understand the trials and tribulations that you've went through to become the man or woman you are today. It's very clear that your well-being is not in their vested interest, okay? Which is a complete contradiction of the original trust indenture that was created by the Founding Fathers. History repeats itself. Why does it repeat itself? Well, because we become lax and we start to accept things that we shouldn't. We start to accept benefits and privileges to make our lives easier, justifying bigger government, which leads to the encroachment on your rights, where they want you to sign away your rights for privileges and putting you underneath their jurisdiction, okay? And basically what they're saying is, well, if you need something from us, you must be incompetent. And if you're incompetent, let us come in and be your saving grace. But we're all seeing where that's getting people. People can't afford their insulin at this point. That's a major concern. I mean, I just watched an audio of a young mother who works 40 hours a week, goes to school part-time, and can't afford her son's insulin. And it's causing her a lot of hardship. So when I'm talking about the law and the common law, and why common law is in the Roman civil side, public law, it's part of the mercantile law, okay? And it's really what the judges did after Erie Railroad versus Hopkins. I think it was Hopkins. And what ended up happening was the 14th Amendment was finally recognized, where corporations have rights. And if corporations have rights, and they had to start making different judgments because they were assessing the bankruptcy. So there are judges out there that have said, if you can bring me a case law, which is an opinion, okay? If you can bring me case law after 1935 that substantiates your standing, I'll abide by it. And what they're telling you is, if you look beyond 1935, if you go back into the 1700s and the 1800s and you look and review court cases after the Founding Fathers' documents were put in place, you will find that back then people's inherent, unalienable rights were upheld. You see, what the Founding Fathers were fighting for was to be able to own land, okay? Own property. And in the past, they weren't able to have allodium title or fee simple title. They were just merely using the king's land. And that was an issue. Because if the king decided you didn't produce enough on his land that year, he would just simply move you off. And of course, he couldn't take your dwelling from you. He couldn't take your materialistic possessions from you, but he could kick you off his land. But back then, let's be honest, moving a house today is a feat of its own, let alone having to move your cottage that you built by hand out of stick and stone off another landmass to move it somewhere else. It was just impossible. So a lot of people would invest their life into building a life on a section of ground and then one day find out they're homeless. Not because they didn't have a home, but because they couldn't move their home from one piece of land to another. So the Founding Fathers really fought to substantiate their claim to land, to being able to hold it in allodium, or fee simple, if you will. And what we have today is a conversion and a perversion of our rights through the common law, the public side, which is what everybody thinks they're getting administered. Oh, I want the common law. Common law is very brutal. It's never been fair. And that's how equity was discovered. Because so often, if your claim didn't fit a rigid mold, then you got no award. You got no remedy, okay? And the men back then, and the women alike, got to thinking about it saying, this isn't right. There's got to be a better way, all right? Evolution of the mind, right? When we start to think outside the box, when times get hard and get tough, we start to think, how can we diversify ourselves? How can we multiply our energy? How can we increase yield with minimum applied effort? We start thinking outside the box, and they started to evaluate this thing that naturally rested on their heart and soul, understanding that there had to have been something greater than just the opinion of man to render a judgment, right? And we look at equity and the rules of equity, and we start to realize that equity is there for what's just, right, fair. It's there to do what should have been done in the first place. And through logical, rational thinking, this beautiful discovery of equity came about. Now, Blackstone, he didn't have it all figured out. He was elder in his years when he started to discover equity, and there were a lot of things in Blackstone that many legal scholars disputed as far as his opinions. And if you don't know who Blackstone is, go look him up. He was very well known. And he started to dabble in equity in his later years, but he didn't have it quite all figured out. You know, when you start to look into Joseph Story, Pomeroy, Henry R. Gibson, those men really had a good, firm understanding and comprehension of equity, which is, I would lend to God consciousness, being aware that there must always be a remedy in the matter of property and rights. There must always be. And they identified that once a trespass occurred, that the trespass continued to occur until remedy was had, because it was a desecration of your very unalienable rights, your rights in general, which are property. And in order to remedy that situation, there had to be a means that worked outside of the jurisdiction of common law. Common law, if you would go into a court, so often you would your remedy you would be asking in those times maybe for a loaf of bread. But as your case went through the common law, at the end of the closing of the case, you would often find instead of a loaf of bread, you ended up with 2 cobblestones. Okay? And that's because the common law, it has its applications, but it's not advantageous for a man bringing a claim to find remedy. Let's put it that way. So then there's the law that's common to I, okay, where I set the jurisdiction, I set the rules of the court. I don't need 12 people to tell me I've been wronged. If I've been wronged and I can prove I've been wronged, then I'm going to compile the evidence and I'm going to follow what is known as due process of law, because my court is the highest court on the land. I don't need anybody to tell me that I've been wronged. So when you're asking for a trial by jury, which is a very, very dangerous thing this day and age, because most people aren't intelligent enough to comprehend what's really transpiring within our great nation. Okay, it's a hostile takeover by a corporation found under Title 28, 3002-15A, which describes the United States as a federal corporation. Okay, corporations only care about one thing. What is it, ladies and gentlemen? They only care about one thing. That's profits, gains, all right? Finding a way to increase that with minimal effort, all while reducing overhead cost. Now, we can all agree that if any of us ran a corporation the way the United States runs its corporation, we'd all be belly up. And they are. They're absolutely belly up. But they're utilizing our energy because we have this false notion that we are operating through a nation as one, undivided, through Washington, D.C., which isn't the truth. Washington, D.C. is engaged in usufruct. They're using and harvesting your sweat equity and your labor, all while making piss-poor investments and unjustly enriching themselves. while making it seemingly harder day in and day out for the common man to survive. We look back at women's rights and the fight for women's rights. The interesting thing about studying the history of the development of the women's rights movement is that women have always had those rights. But what it really was to separate the woman from the children and get her out to the workforce where they could tax her labor. Okay? They needed to generate more wherewithal, and they needed more labor out in the field. And so they convinced women that they didn't have any of these rights, and they needed to fight for their right to work. They needed to get out there and fight and show their man who wears the pants in the household. This was a ploy to get their hands on your offspring, and every last one of us fell for it. Of course, as the times got tougher and taxation got higher, of course, a single man working a full-time job couldn't provide ends meet anymore. Now the woman had to be out in the field. There was no issues about it. Either the man had to work 2 jobs, almost 2 full-time jobs to provide for his offspring, or the woman had to be out of the house as well. And then comes an era where offspring are shooting each other in schools, and we wonder why. You know, I talked to my mother about this, and she said, Derek, I'm going to tell you right now, if anybody would have been thinking about that when we were kids, their old man would have knocked them through the wall. They'd still be feeling the pain from getting their ass whooped over thinking about taking a gun to school to do harm to anybody, all right? It's not to say that those instances didn't happen from time to time, but in this day and age where morality has been thrown out the window, it's absolutely been thrown out the window. And who's to blame for that? We can point our finger at government. We can point our finger at our communities. We can point our finger at a litany of different reasons. YouTube, internet, the disgusting, vile stuff that we're seeing on TV, the immoral things that come through our radios nowadays, through music and everything else. But the truth is, until we accept the liability and the responsibility for where we are today, nothing can change. So let's talk about due process of law. All right, due process of law is very, very simple. The law, by design, by the Heavenly Father, is meant to be so simple that every man and woman can comprehend it. That's how simple it is. Keep your hands to yourself. Don't take what don't belong to you. Trespass not against anybody, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, that could be a problem for a lot of people. You know, there's a lot of people that don't have love for themselves, don't have drive, don't have energy to push. They're at their breaking point. You're supposed to help those people. You're supposed to reach out to them and say, hey, I've been there. I know what you're going through, all right? And work together in unity to ascend to the mind. We're seeing a lot of changes throughout smaller communities. In my discussions with people in England, people over in New Zealand, people in Australia, we're all communicating at a phenomenal rate. And we're seeing a lot of positive changes because of the ascension of the mind by learning things like maxims of law, equity, what the real law is and how it's applicable, and most of all, due process of law. So due process of law is simple again. It's notice and opportunity. So I'm going to start out my first polite correspondence when I am a man aggrieved by a trespass caused by another man who sometimes operates underneath a title. Because most often, it's the alleged government officials who end up egregiously encroaching into my rights, my liberties, my freedoms without just cause or a warrant. Okay? And that's a trespass causing I, a man, harm. And in most instances, not all, I do have some officers that just like to shoot the shit with me, all right? And I'll hold that against them. They're on duty. They just want to shoot the shit. I'll shoot the shit with them. I'm cool with that, all right? But what I'm trying to point out here is in almost every instant that an agent has contact with you, it is for one purpose, and that is to generate revenue, period. Period. Whether it's to abduct your offspring, issue you a citation, whether it's to manufacture a crime, that's a huge, huge deal. They do that all the time. There are over 66 million codes in the United States which only apply to the Washington, D.C. District of Columbia, and yet most lawyers couldn't recite 100 of them. And there's over 66 million statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations. It would take 10 lifetimes to master that, and let's be honest, nobody knows it. Statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations in most instances are written vague and ambiguously. All right? So can that be law? Can a man be honestly expected to remember 66 million statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations, and policies, not only within their community, but within other states? And the answer to that is no. But what is to be known? What is to be true and correct that all men can grasp the very concept of is the actual law, which states, trespass not against anybody for any reason, period. So my first correspondence is it's very polite. It's just this is a notice and opportunity, a friendly correspondence. Your encounter with me the other day caused I a man harm by theft of my property, which was my time, and I'm billing you $1,600 for the hour that we had on the side of the road. All right, it's that simple. That's the notice and opportunity. The proof is in the warning or the ticket on the side of the road that was issued. And guess what? It wasn't the judge's fault. It ain't the prosecutor's fault. It ain't the state's fault. Okay? It's that man's problem. So a lot of times you guys are trying to bring suit after these people. You're trying to sue the governor. The governor just said some shit on TV. He didn't make that man do what he did. That man is 100% liable for his actions. Let me show you something. Legislators, they allegedly make policies, right? And those policies may or may not apply to you, just depending on your state of mind. If you believe you're a U.S. citizen, I'm telling you now, the statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations, they apply to you. All right? And I have no ill will or animosity against U.S. citizens. I'm all for you guys. Power to you. Keep trucking. Keep pushing. Do what you do. I don't have any problem with that. What's interesting is when you finally ascend of the mind and you comprehend how to hold people liable for their action, the bullshit stops. Because nobody wants to lose their house. Nobody wants to lose their car for a lousy paycheck. And I'm telling you, with the knowledge that I have as the respondent superior, let the master speak. I'm telling you, with the knowledge that I have, these people will stop. So the first is a polite notice and opportunity to correct the wrong that has happened. It's a violation by way of trespass. It's a violation of law by way of trespass causing I a man harm. John Henry Doe, who sometimes acts as an agent and agency. Title is really irrelevant, okay? Now, they're supposed to be independently bonded for this very reason. You see, how can we trust them if they're not insured, right? And they're supposed to be insured. But in many, many states, what you will find is this thing called a blanket bond. So what do we want in the instance that, let's just say they ignore the first correspondence? And remember, the first correspondence, that's just me being nice. That's me extending equity, right? In order to receive equity, you must do equity. Equity is just simply notice an opportunity. Here's the date, the time. This is what transpired. This is what you're guilty of, okay? This is how you violated my unalienable rights, which is a trespass causing I a man harm. I am a man aggrieved, and this is what's due and owing. I'm going to give you 21 days to pay that. At the end of 21 days, I've got nothing back. I haven't got an F you, kiss my ass. Most often, these people don't respond. You want to know why they don't respond? They don't know the law. And the lawyers that they conversate with go, ha, shit, don't worry about that, Bob. He ain't shit. Trust me. I'll tell you right now with firsthand knowledge, I can make a lawyer shake in his boots in about 3 seconds. It's not hard, all right? Because I'll hold them liable as a conspirator after the fact. They're not going to touch it with a stick. They're not even going to get anywhere near it, okay? So the second notice that comes out is now a notice an opportunity for remedy with the intent to sue, okay? That's the second part of due process of law. First was a friendly correspondence, and in 21 days, they make it right with you, whatever your remedy may be, they settle up with you, then it's completely gone. There's no controversy anymore. All right? Remedy has been had according to you and how you saw fit. And you didn't need 12 people to decide what you were worth, whether or not you were violated, because you have the evidence of being accosted against your will. In the citation by itself proves the criminal act. Period. All right? They're giving you all the evidence you need to hang them. And I'm talking metaphorically, not physically, all right? We don't want to take life. It's a bad deal. So the second notice goes out. And this time, instead of giving him 21 days, I'm going to give him 10. Because I get to dictate what the response time needs to be. And as long as it's over 72 hours, we're good. And I'm going to give him an additional 3 days for mailing. Consideration, right? Value and consideration. And I see that there was a smiley face that went across the deal because they're laughing. Only because they don't understand what the hell I'm about to tell you. But I'll tell you right now, this works. And you can apply it. And you can apply a lien afterward if need be. But you won't have to do that. You won't have to do that. So the second thing is the intent to sue, nihil dicet. Nihil dicet is a statutory element, okay? Nihil dicet just simply means he says nothing, all right? It's better than a show of cause, an intent to sue for show of cause. For show of cause why they haven't performed after they caused me harm, right? Which is a trespass, and the trespass continues to be a trespass until remedied. So all I'm simply doing is letting them know that if you don't respond, this is the course of action that's going to play out. So again, my paragraph is the same as the first notice and opportunity, with all the evidence that I sent them. A copy of their ticket, a copy of the video, whatever it is. Whatever you have for the evidence and the proof to substantiate your claim. And remember, you're the claimant, they're the respondent. All right? After 10 days, nothing occurs. So you give them the additional 3 days for the mailing because it's honorable. You're going to give them those 3 days, right? 10 millimeter wrench is missing. You're right. So anyway, you give them the 3 days courtesy of the mail because the mail could be off by 3 days. So we're going to give them the 3-day leniency. So you're at 13 days. Now comes your third notice. Okay? Your first one was just your polite correspondence. Your second one was your intent to sue. Your third notice is going to be your notice of fault. It's been 13 days. I've received no response. You've agreed by tacit agreement that you owe a true bill due and owing. Is it your intent at this point not to pay the true bill due and owing for the trespass and the harm that I've been caused? Okay? They haven't rebutted it. They haven't rebuked it. They haven't answered it. So they've agreed to it. Okay? Silence is equated to acquiescence. All right? The reason that I'm asking is that your intent not to pay the true bill due and owing is now I'm proving intent. Because if they're not going to remedy the situation, there's another manifestation of a claim coming out of that. And I'll show you why here in a second. Because your first one is a true bill due and owing in equity. True bill is not a debt. Does anybody on here know when it becomes a debt? Because it does transform into a debt, but certain things have to happen before that occurs. So the third letter is a notice of fault. Intent to sue, nihil dicet, means he says nothing. And I've laid out the evidence, and now I want to know if it's his intent not to pay. The fourth one is the letter of default, notice an opportunity to cure. I'm going to give him another 10 days. Maybe I give him 20 days. Maybe you want to give him 30 days. Whatever you feel is necessary. I'm going to give him that opportunity to respond. But it's a notice of default. If he fails to respond at that point, now I'm moving forward with my suit. Okay? And you can hold your court wherever you want to hold your court. You just got to record it on the record. And you can also go into their public venues and schedule a date and time to have it rubber stamped off on. Now, remember in the third one, we did that, and the fourth one, we did the notice of fault, opportunity to cure. Okay? Now we're ready for our declaratory judgment after 10 days, 20 days, whatever you pick. You just have to be very clear about what you're doing. Okay? Whatever you pick for the day. And you're going to give them that 3-day grace period on the mailing, just in case they may have gotten into the mail and you didn't receive it yet. So it's important for you to be very observant on the envelopes, should they respond, to make sure they didn't respond a day late. Okay, you can give grace and you can give leniency if you wish, but you don't have to. They had a duty, an obligation to respond in said amount of time. And if it's postmarked 2 days later, then they defaulted, all right? They acquiesced. It could be argued, there's room for grace. It could be argued, hey, my mother ended up in the hospital. I didn't have a time. It would be fair to extend that grace, that leniency, right? You would expect the same. Do unto others as you expect unto you, right? So it's not about being hostile and rude and brutal, but you already have the evidence you need to bring your claim, substantiate your claim, and get compensated for it. Period. All right? So let's say they don't respond to the notice of default, opportunity to cure. You've given them 10 days. The 3 days has elapsed. Now, create your declaratory judgment. Okay? All your documents should have nice little headers at the top. Remember, equity disregards form and looks at the intent. And the intent is to provide remedy for harm that has been caused by the actions of another. All right? No one's above the law. Ignorance of the law excuses no one, for all men are responsible for knowing the contracts they enter into. Period. So there's no leniency there. Especially when you're an agent and agency working in law enforcement or a lawyer. I have zero tolerance for ignorance in that field at all, because it's unacceptable. And we the people have allowed it to manifest to what it is today by not being learned ourselves and holding them to a higher standard. We're the ones to blame. And the only way the correction is going to come is if you spank that ass. That's the only way it's going to come. All right? You're going to have to spank a couple of them, and they'll start chit-chatting going, hey, you come across this one, don't do anything stupid. Don't try and take their kids. Don't encroach on their property. Don't try and make entry in their home. Don't do anything ignorant, because I tell you what, when the guy's done with you, you won't have a pot to piss in, and that's the only thing they're afraid of. That's it. That's the only thing they're afraid of. So now you send out your declaratory judgment. You don't have to send it to him, but why not? Let him know where I'm going with this. He will have no plausible deniability by the end of this process that he didn't fully receive what is known to be due process of law. The writ of execution will be to liquidate his estate, liquidate his 401k, liquidate his house, liquidate his automobiles, liquidate his kids' college funds. It will be, the writ of execution will be to liquidate everything until I'm made completely whole. That's the name of the game. Commerce is war, ladies and gentlemen. Business is war. You don't believe me? Go look at the stock market right now. Go look at GameStop. Go look at how all this shit goes. War is lucrative. War has always been profitable. And commerce is, in fact, war. It's what it is. All right? You'll notice that I don't use any statutes. I don't use any codes. I'm not going to use Title 18, 1661, which is one of my favorite ones, which is piracy on the land. But I'm not going to use that, because I am simply identifying the difference between legal and lawful. And I'm on the lawful side. And on the lawful side, theft is a crime. A breach of my peace is a crime. And I don't give a shit if you claim it's your job. Don't make a bit of difference to me. If you accost me against my will and I'm not free to move from point A to point B, or you grab me and move me an inch, I don't care if it's an inch or a mile, it's kidnapping, it's abduction, and I'm going to own you. I'm going to own you. Because if you think it's proper for you to be able to do those things to people, I have a duty to remove you. And I'm not talking lethally. I'm talking I'm going to have you mowing my yard for the rest of your life. I'm going to keep you busy. I'm going to have you stirring cups of coffee for me. Just so I know that you ain't being bothering nobody else in a costume masquerading around as law enforcement. I've talked to some police officers that say that in their community, they're just to kind of sweep under the rug people's claims. And what they're supposed to do is go generate revenue through tickets and manufacturing crimes. So when you actually call them and say, hey, somebody broke into my house, they're kind of, whatever. If we get to it, we get to it. If we stumble across a crackhead and we find something that may pertain to this, we may pursue it. But for the most part, they're more interested in generating securities than they are actually doing detective work and solving crimes. All right? And there are people that think I'm absolutely batshit crazy. To each his own. I can only talk with firsthand knowledge of what I've experienced and what I've seen. And for those of you that have been with me a while, you know, if you just go back in my Facebook wall and look at how vehement and adamant I am about justice, you'll see I walk right into the lion's den, the hornet's nest, and I'll beat the shit out of them with knowledge. And to the point where they're like, can you just leave? We just don't want you here anymore. Because you don't want to learn how to do your job? Or because you believe asking a lawyer who's turned this country upside down is more advantageous to you gaining knowledge than listening to a man who studies for 16 to 18 hours a day about the truth, about real law. So, back to due process of law. Remember in the third letter where I asked if it was their intent not to pay the true bill due and owing? Well, that also causes another cause of action. And that cause of action is called trespass by way of debt. Okay? At first, it was a true bill due and owing. There's no controversy at that point, except for the fact that remedy needs to be had for the actions that were exhibited. That's it. But the trespass by way of debt is again another trespass causing eye harm, which merits another claim. Now their dereliction in their duty to make me whole becomes an issue. All right. And it's an issue that I will be aggrieved about because now I'm going to have to move forward with the process of the suit, which is going to cost me time and energy. Right. You know, in a small claims court, most of them are capped out 15,000, some 1,500, some 10,000. You know where you recoup your damages is in your cost. It's in your cost, ladies and gentlemen. Take them for the full amount in small claims of 15 grand and go after them for the treble damages in your costs. That's simple. You had to spend 10 years researching and studying, 16 to 18 hours a day. You had to go back and find out whether they had their delegation of authority to operate outside of Washington, D.C., whether they had an affidavit attached and a launch to their oath of office, whether or not they took a real oath of office, whether or not they were independently bonded. All of that stuff adds up. I don't know about you, but sometimes my time's worth $500,000 a minute. I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but I'm telling you right now, there are some times my time's extraordinarily valuable, especially when I'm dealing with tyrants. My time is so valuable, it's not even funny. So let's talk about, that was just a brief over due process of law, which really isn't that hard to understand. It's just notice and opportunity. That's all it is. All right? And comprehending how to put your claim together. Remember, if you're making a complaint, all you're effectively doing is bitching. If you're making a claim, well, now everybody's pulling their testicles out. All right? You're putting everything on the chopping block. Okay? Because that was the original meaning of testifying. That's why men could only do it, was because they had testes. They put their testes on the chopping block to support the fact they weren't lying. Most men, I don't know, nowadays it's a little different with sexual confusion going on, but most men don't want to lose their testicles. All right? So if you're willing to put your testicles out there, they knew you were serious. So let's get into some maximums here for just a second. We covered quite a bit the other day, and it's important because I feel that these one-sentence facts seem to help people more than anything in their troubled times. So right is threefold: of property, of possession, and of possibility. We are all slaves to the law in order that we may become free. All right? You have to understand, comprehend, and learn the law in order to know what freedom is. Check this out. My rights stop where yours begin, and trust me, I know where mine end. All right? So often people say, well, Derek, the Constitution only says I have the right to bear arms, the right to freedom of speech, I got the right to be secure in my persons, places, houses, papers, and effects. What about the unenumerated? Where's it written that you have the right to breathe? You know, it's an involuntary muscle spasm, but just the same, did anybody write that you have the right to breathe? Well, most people say, well, Derek, that's just common sense, man. How could you make a law say I can't breathe? Unfortunately, for a lot of the people out there, I just think it's common sense to be learned in law. And many people don't even comprehend that, you know? So yeah, is your right to breathe an unalienable right granted to you by the Heavenly Creator? It absolutely is. Does it need to be written? No, it doesn't. But if you don't know that you have a right to breathe, you might have a problem. What about your right to urinate and defecate? What about your right to ride a bicycle? Do you need permission to do these things? Many of you listen to the government better than you listened to your parents when you were growing up. And it's freaking outstanding. It's outstanding that you have become so subservient as men and women that you listen to the government that doesn't care an iota about you, but you barely listen to your folks. That's crazy. It's insanity. The mercantile commercial code is not merchant law, it's close. The law is the law of the land. So they're basically in this maximum, this is where I'm talking about the Roman civil maxims, says the mercantile law is the law of the land. We all know that not to be true. All right. It might be the law of the sea. It might be the Admiralty Maritime law. It might be the law of the world, but it's definitely not the law of the land. It is not the law of the earth. And so you have to be able to distinguish when a maxim is Roman civil equity and it resembles equity. It has the characteristics of equity by the way it sounds, but it is not, in fact, operating on the private side. The law assists the ignorant. The name of lawsuit signifies every action, whether it be for the thing or against the person. Speak as the ordinary people, think as the learned. He must suffer in body if he has nothing in his purse. Ta-da! Another Roman civil maxim. Let me say it again. He must suffer in body if he has nothing in his purse. Financial, law of merchants, it's definitely not a godly maxim driven from the Bible. It just isn't. It's a civil Roman maxim, okay? Just like the common law, civil Roman common law. It's based upon judges' decisions, which is nothing more than their damn opinions. When in the history of the Supreme Court, and I can't say when in the history because I know that it's happened a number of times now, but my point to all this is that over the last 100 years, the Supreme Court justices very, very rarely agree unanimously across the board. So you're allowing 9 people who are so indecisive but allegedly learned in law to dictate how you live your life based upon their opinion, and they don't even all agree. Why would you be using the common law? Maybe you should invest in using the law common to yourself, the law common to I, right? And if you want to learn more about that, John Little does an amazing class on the law common to I with a plethora of first-hand knowledge of exactly what I just explained to you with due process of law. And he busts it out on a 10-hour course, and I've never heard anything bad coming out of him. And I'll be honest with you, and I'm talking about his teachings. I don't see anything wrong with it. I've got a course of his, and I've been through it, and it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. Speak as the ordinary people, think as the learned. He must suffer in body if he has nothing in his purse. A guardian ought not make money out of the guardianship of his ward. So let me read it again, but let me infuse this sentence to help you understand it better. A guardian, the state, ought not to make money out of the guardianship, the citizenship, okay, of his ward. People. The people. Does that make more sense? That maximum is powerful. A guardian ought not to make money out of the guardianship of his ward, the people. That is a bad case wherein one tries to accomplish with money that which should be prompted by virtue. A maximum is so called because it is dignity. Okay, hold on. A maximum is so called because its dignity is chiefest and its authority the most certain, and because it is universally approved by all. Murder, positive law, public law, unanimously across the board, murder is wrong. It's chiefest. All right? So again, when we're looking at this, a maximum is so called because its dignity is chiefest and its authority the most certain, and because it is universally approved by all. Thou shalt not steal. Well, I think everybody agrees with that. You know, one of my favorite sayings when somebody takes something from me that doesn't belong to them, well, I guess they liked it a little more than I did, right? Because if I liked it a little bit more, I probably would have kept it under lock and key or kept a better watch of it, right? So I wasn't vigilant and I lost something. But does that mean that I don't have remedy? I don't have a cause of action? Absolutely not. Because you shouldn't be taking things that don't belong to you. Men are not included under the name of merchandise. Now, I was on a call last night with Malika and Keith Little. Bless their hearts. They're just phenomenal researchers. And she went as far as to say that she had actually found a statute that almost verbatim says the exact same thing as this maxim. Men are not included under the name of merchandise, okay? And what you will find in a lot of statutory rules, regulations, city ordinances, and provisions is they, in fact, utilize these maxims. They just rearrange the words a little bit. But they're essentially saying the same thing. Obedience is miserable where the law is vague and uncertain. Statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations, ladies and gentlemen, are in fact not law. And they're most often written vague and ambiguously. So a bill of particulars is needed because I don't know if I resisted arrest or if I evaded arrest. Those are the kind of frivolous complaints most district attorneys bring when you read the pleadings. It says he either resisted arrest or he evaded arrest. Well, which is it? You moron. You're bringing a claim under a bunch of vague and ambiguous terms and can't quantify your position because you yourself have no first-hand knowledge and weren't there. And who says I'm subject to those statutes, codes, rules, city ordinances? Let the man alleging that I am 100% bound by that come forward and speak now or forever hold your peace. Don't you ever bring a claim against me under statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations again without a victim. Because if you do, I'm going to take your house. It's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to take your house. And you should all have that conviction in you. All right? Because as soon as we start doing these things, by operation of law, following due process of law, shit will change. And for the better, immediately. All right? Let's talk about forced vaccinations for a minute. Notice of liability. Go look it up. You need to do some research on it. Remember how I was talking about due process of law? Well, what are we going to give these pharmacists and these doctors who wish to use us as guinea pigs for this new RNMA shot that allegedly was the co-conspirator behind it was Bill Gates? Never graduated college, people. What the hell are you doing taking medical advice from an idiot and incompetent? He might know computers. He may very well know digital viruses. But does he really understand the human body? Now I know he probably talks to very, very learned men and women who have been practicing medicine for a long time. But there's a reason they haven't perfected it, ladies and gentlemen, because the Heavenly Father already perfected medication. Everything that bear fruit or bear seed has an application and the ability to heal our body. We're supposed to keep our temples clean. It's not the four walls of the church that make the church. Your church is here, along with your pineal gland, to ascend of the mind. All right? God consciousness. Doesn't mean that you are the God, but let me remind you, you were made in his image. The same blood that courses through your veins, indeed, in fact, flowed through Jesus Christ. That's a fact. And I take on anybody that wants to argue that. All right? You have power beyond this realm, and you just don't even know it. This meat suit that you're in now will dissipate and decay someday. This I know to be true. But your spirit does not die. That energy does not dissipate when this body gets laid to rest. So think about your conduct and where you're going in the future to make sure that you're taking and harvesting the best energy you can take from this earth with you when you go. We are ignorant of many things that should not be hidden from us if the readings of old authors were familiar to us. This brings up a great point, and it's a maxim. And again, you can't argue it. You can't argue it. The oldest law written is the best law, is what I have come to find in all my studies. The older the law, the older the writ, the more true the language, the more virtuous the script, the more power it yields and holds. Beautiful, beautiful. Multiplicity and indistinctness produces confusion and questions. The more simple they are, the more lucid. All right, statutes and codes, does that ring a bell when I read that? Multiplicity and indistinctness produces confusion. Are those statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations a little confusing? Have you went through Title 15 to figure out who consumer debtor is, consumer transaction, consumer debt? Have you read through some of these titles? What's the very definition for the word code? Code is something that needs to be deciphered. What makes you think that you have a reading level in order to comprehend and decipher exactly what they're speaking of? How many of you realize that when Congress goes in, or the legislator goes in, or any of these branches of government go in and make a document, they actually have their own dictionary that they go by so they understand what the words in the writ apply to and what they mean? How many of you comprehend that? Government styles manuals. They're used on everything. But I never hear any gurus talking about going and finding the government styles manual that matches the document in order to comprehend and fully ascend to the mind as to what the document actually applies to. You never hear anybody talking about that. It is more useful to impart a few trustworthy ideas than to impress men with many useless things. It is infamous to lay snares for the innocent through forms of law. Is color of law a form of law that snared you as of lately? It is infamous to lay snares for the innocent through forms of law. All right? A double negative is an affirmative. Denial cannot be proved. No one acts against himself. Well, it's kind of funny when you read no one acts against himself, and then you look at the Fifth Amendment, the right not to incriminate yourself. I wonder where these brilliant men came up with such sophisticated ideas. No one can rightly understand part of a thing till he has read through the whole again and again. Just because you read it once, ladies and gentlemen, don't kid yourself. Don't start presuming and assuming you know something, because the second you presume and assume to know something, you limit your ability to grow. All right? You want to be damn certain that it is what you believe it to be. Belief being the lack of knowledge. Read it 3, 4, 5 times. Find the government styles manual that goes with it. Or read that book 3 or 4 or 5 times. Maybe do some due diligence into the language that's being used in a dictionary so you can ascend to the mind and comprehend what's being conveyed. To put an adjective in front of a noun diminishes the noun. I never went through English class. 7th grade was the last year I went through an English class, by the way. So me learning grammar, myself learning punctuations, how they apply, when to use them, it's new, but it just goes to show we're never done growing. We're never done learning. All right? The minute you think you know everything, step outside, dig you a 6-foot hole, lay down. We'll come plant some daisies for you. Because you're absolutely useless with that mindset. I am ignorant. I go to bed every night ignorant. And I wake up every morning thirsty to gain more knowledge. All right? To be a better man than I was before. Okay? Learn your 6 best friends. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Because they're literally going to be your best friends. What I have found is the more I know, the more I have learned, the less I actually know. And it sounds absolutely insane. But one thing I can say is, you can't prove a negative. And so who, what, when, where, why, and how are your best friends in a court. And as long as you keep asking questions, it's not a jailable offense. And what ends up happening when you eat up too much of their court? Because, see, they have a quota. They have to meet certain numbers throughout the year. Through CPS, through the criminal division, through their private administrative claims, on the civil side, the civil claims. They have a lot they have to get done. And when they run into you and you're asking who, what, when, where, why, and how, well, all of a sudden your 5-minute arraignment just became 2 hours and 45 minutes. They could have fleeced 50 other people. They don't want to deal with people that ask questions that use logical thinking. He says contempt for asking questions. You can't throw a man in contempt for asking questions. That presupposes that he has a right to a fair and meaningful hearing and a right to comprehend and understand what's being done. So that's laughable that anybody would say contempt. And contempt, let's get on with it. Contempt of what? Is it a civil claim that's being brought against? If it be civil, then please bring forward the contract in which that I'm in breach of. And if it's criminal, then you better bring the injured party forward under penalties of perjury with a sworn affidavit. Oh, and the judge wants to be the one that's alleging that they're being harmed, damaged, injured? Well, you can't be the judge, jury, and executioner of your own claim. So I suggest you file it properly in the court. Far be it from me to explain the law to you. After all, if you need legal advice, and I know you're a judge, you should probably hire a competent attorney to help you comprehend how you should proceed and move forward with that. Then they want to go, well, direct contempt. Contempt doesn't even exist, ladies and gentlemen. It's a fallacy. It's something they create. But get this, if you don't know how to object to it, guess what happens? Latches occur. You acquiesced. You don't know what direct contempt is. You failed to ask what direct contempt is. You failed to get them to qualify what direct contempt is. And guess what? You just got found in direct contempt. Bailiff, take him to jail. It's that simple. They're there playing tricks on your mind. They're stealing your most precious gift, which is time. Time being nothing more than a theory and an illusion that man uses in order to engage in commerce. Sun goes up, sun comes down, okay? Without time, there could be no contract, because without a start date and an end point, you can't have contract. Unless you're going to use the third time the moon is full in the sky, you should have me made whole. I guess there's another way of doing it aside from time, right? We could go by happenings of the moon, the cycles of the moon. But again, time is nothing more than a theory. I showed up to a court case at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, knowing that I was supposed to be there at 9. But 3 o'clock where? 3 o'clock in Buena Veras? 3 o'clock in Colorado? 3 o'clock in California? Nobody really specified. When I got there, the judge was pissed. You were supposed to be here at 9 o'clock. Why weren't you here? Well, it's 9 o'clock somewhere, Judge. The good Lord have me here now. Is there a reason we can't conduct the day's business of the court today? Is the court done doing business? Far be it from me. If the court's done doing business, I guess we can't do business. But if it's 3 o'clock and you still got things that we can be doing, well, then I suggest we move forward. Are you creating controversy where otherwise none exist? What are you so upset for? Well, I read everybody's rights together. Well, you don't want to read my rights together with everybody else's, because I'm going to liberate them all of them. Because if you're going to read to me in a group, I'm going to take charge of that group, and I'm going to lead them to safe harbor. I'm going to lead them to safer pastures. So the good Lord did you a favor. He did you a favor. Then he wanted me to step outside the door. Why does he want me to step outside the door? So he can reassert his jurisdiction. He needs me to voluntarily obey what he says because I didn't obey him in the first instance. And that presupposes that if I actually showed up at 9 o'clock, that he was going to deal with me and me alone. Because we all know that ain't true. Anybody that's been to court, shit, you're told to be there at 9, and you might wait till 10:30 before they call your name. They're in breach of contract. You asked me to show up at a particular time, and if my matter isn't that important that you can push it off 3 hours down the road, see ya. Case closed. We're done. You set the time. I was there. You didn't want to deal with me. That's breach of contract. You're in default. Commercial dishonor. And I'm out of here. Have a nice day. Takes a lot of balls to be able to do that. A lot of balls. But it can be done. All right. No one should be condemned, unheard, or unsummoned. Okay, this is an essential element to due process of law. Remember we were talking about due process of law? Well, herein is a maxim that who knows how old it is. It's at least from the 1880s. Okay, this is a Bluebird's 1880s dictionary on maxims. Okay, and it says no one should be condemned, unheard, or unsummoned. And of course the cliff note in here that was put in here by my brother James Bethel, who is articulate and brilliant in every sense of the word. He says this is an essential element of due process, to be summoned and to be heard. All right, if you ain't being heard, you ain't getting due process of law. That's a major violation. Without due process of law, there is nothing. All right? So you have to have due process of law. And even equity recognizes that. And remember, without law, equity flourishes. But without equity, there is no such thing as law. All right? Law relies heavily. Contract law relies heavily upon equity. No one may be dragged from his own home. We look back at the Castle Doctrine, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say, but Derek, you tell us we don't own our property. You don't. You don't own your property. You don't own your real estate. There's easements. There's attachments. There's blind adhesion contracts. Do I know how to get rid of all that? Absolutely. Can it be done? Yes. Is it advantageous and beneficial for you to do so? That's what you have to comprehend. Once you do those things, you're not going to get a loan from a bank anymore on that said property because they realize that they can't collateralize it. All right? And then you have to understand Title 15, subsection 1, subpart 1 that says if they interfere with trade and commerce, it's a $100 million fine. Then you have to comprehend that you have the power to create your own notes, your own drafts, and that the obligor is in fact the United States. And you have to understand how to enforce it. All right? So that's a tough decision for a lot of people. Like I tell people, the reason people don't live in the Republic, it comes with a lot of responsibility. It's not easy. You're going to get your bumps and your bruises. You're going to go to jail at some point. Now it's whether or not you're going to stand with conviction. I mean, after all, it's not like your hands and feet are going to be nailed to a cross where you're going to be out there in the blistering sun with no water and some wretch is going to stab you in the ribs and collapse one of your lungs so you can't frickin' breathe. It's a few days in a pokey. It's 3 hots and a cot. Kick back, relax. No signature, no photographs, no contracts, no fingerprints, nothing. You get nothing from me. You're going to pay to warehouse me. I'm not paying to warehouse myself and issuing securities and being the surety at the same time without being availed. Bullshit. And as soon as you figure that out, they're done playing with you. 99.9% of the people of this world are good by nature, and the news media would have you believe that nobody can be trusted. You hear it on your local news station. If you see something suspicious in your area, please give us a call at the Sheriff's Department. We'd be more than happy to go investigate for you. What the hell are you not minding your own damn business for? All right? If Cindy Lou enjoys the company of multiple men, none of your business. Do I think it's right? It's irrelevant. It's none of your business. Don't do their jobs for them. They're good enough at fleecing the hardworking American people and stealing a paycheck out of their pocket and off their table. You don't need to assist them. They manufacture crimes in 90% of their cases. I could damn near go overturn 90% of the cases that have ever been convicted so long as there wasn't a victim. And I'm very confident in that. Very confident. Because jurisdiction can be challenged at any time, and due process of law lends to jurisdiction, and without a victim, there is no crime. None. Absolutely none. And by using deceptive and misleading trade practices and documents and forms, you can liberate your family who's incarcerated. Can be done. No one should fill two offices. Well, that's the separation of powers doctrine, ladies and gentlemen. No one should fill two offices at the same time. Why? Because power goes to people's heads. What you people need to understand is you're more powerful than any of them. You just have to become learned. No one is compelled to substitute another in his own place. Now, I have stood in a court as surety for the principal for another man who didn't know how to take care and manage his estate, and I came in as surety, just looking to be availed, which means I want a full accounting and I want to exercise my right of subrogation. I wish I would have videotaped the look on their faces when I said that, because that told the court that man knows what the hell he's doing. That man is one dangerous individual. That man, if we move on, is more than likely going to file some forms with the IRS, the SEC, the FTC. That man is a liability, and we just as soon dismiss this case and pray that he doesn't ask anything else except walk out of the building. As we walked out of the building, I looked at the man and I said, "Hey, do you want your possessions back that they stole from you?" And he goes, "Dude, I'm just happy to be going back to Colorado. I just want to go. I don't want to push the issue." I said, "Okay, we'll see you later. I did my job. I would really like an opportunity to go in there and make them go into the evidence locker and get your shit back for you, because they stole from you. Theft of property is a crime, and they took your property without just compensation." Man, again, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm out of here. I just want to go home. I thought I was going to be doing a couple of years in jail. I just want to go home. Okay, we're cool with that. We can only offer, right? No one is beyond the law. Now, when you read statutes, you will find that police officers, state troopers, and sheriffs have exemptions in the statutes, codes, and city ordinances. Well, that presupposes that nobody's above the law, doesn't it? Boy, that's a hell of a concept. Wait a minute. You put a Cracker Jack badge on with a clown outfit, and all of a sudden you're impervious from the law. I know what you're not impervious from. Lead. Nobody is immune from lead. Now, I'm not advocating violence. I'm just saying. There's the law, ladies and gentlemen. The law of nature. Takes you back to the law of the jungle almost, doesn't it? All right? If their privileges supersede your rights, where did they get the authority to do it? Are you following me? If I don't have a right to rob my neighbor, what say you? Does a group of 10 men have the right to rob my neighbor? Yes or no? Now, logically, spiritually, and written on your heart, you know that shit's wrong. It don't matter if it's 100 people that agree to rob your neighbor. So if I don't have the authority to rob my neighbor, what gives an agent and agency the authority to rob my neighbor? How is it that somehow his privileges in his clown outfit make it okay to violate another man's rights, which is an indirect violation of my rights? And if I allow that tyranny to transpire, it's going to happen to me eventually. Worse off yet, it's going to happen to my offspring. Boy, if that don't grab you by the balls and make you want to learn, become learned, help your neighbor, I don't know what will. Let's read on here. No one is above the law. No one is beyond the law. The law can reach everybody. All right? All men are either free men or they're slaves. There is nothing in between. It's not gray. It's black and white. You're either free or you're not. You either own property or you are the property. This comes from an extensive amount of reading, ladies and gentlemen. When I dropped out of school at a very young age, I was very, very fortunate to have 65-year-old U.S. Marines that kind of took me under their belt who were very, very educated, all right? And they told me, we can't allow to have an incompetent, ignorant man in our town. We can't allow it. So you're going to learn some things here. Just because you're out of school don't mean you're done learning. And they went on and on and on to teach me and show me not only different traits, not only different skills, but also a way of using critical thinking to evaluate what is happening, where I'm getting my information from, how to use deductive reasoning in order to come to a common comprehension of what's being done and why, right? Critical thinking. And a lot of people have lost that because the public school system, that's the last thing they want you doing is critical thinking. You do as you're told, you respect authority, and if they tell you to do something, by golly, you better do it. And that's wrong. That's wrong. Every definition in law is dangerous, for there is but little that cannot be overthrown. Every definition in law is dangerous, for there is but little that cannot be overthrown. Remember how I told you that the more I learn, the less I know? What I've come to find is that really, in this world, on this earth, nobody really knows anything. You got people who have formulated opinions based upon critical thinking. You have some that believe we've made it to the moon, while you have others that say you can't possibly have made it through the Van Allen radiation belt. All right? You have others that say it's an impossibility to get through what the Heavenly Father has created, which is a dome over top of the earth. You have others that yet believe the world is flat. Some believe it's round. Okay? But nobody really knows, do they? Nobody really knows. One thing I can tell you is the law is written on your heart. I know that to be true. That law is the best which leaves least to the discretion of the judge. Did you hear me? That law is the best which leaves the least to the discretion of a judge. All right? An integral part being taken away, the whole is taken away. If an intricate part of your proceeding is taken away and struck as evidence from the record, a great miscarriage of justice has been done. All right? Because the whole has now been taken away. You see how that maxim could be used in a public setting to help you out? Your Honor, what do you mean that my evidence is going to be stricken from the record? An integral part being taken away, the whole is taken away, Your Honor. Now do you see how you've put an heir at law on that man? You've put a burden on his heart to do the right thing, to correct the record, to reevaluate it. Now he may look at you and say, hey, tough cookies. You got a problem with my opinions? Take it up in the appeals, because they know that the impoverished people of the earth very rarely can go to an appeals court. They don't have the financial wherewithal. They don't have the knowledge. These people are crooks. They put themselves in a position to use and abuse you, and if the people in the community don't start getting together and educating their sheriff and going together in court to become witnesses of the tyrannical behavior that's being exhibited, nothing will change. That's why I'm with such conviction when I do these videos for absolutely nothing to you guys. Because it's imperative that my community is sent to the mind with me. I can't be the only one. I may be the only one that sounds off like he's got a pair, but it doesn't mean, that's nothing without having a plethora of people behind you that are cognitive of what's really transpiring. Because when push comes to shove, I did have a community come behind me. I was looking at 10 years. 75 people showed up to the courtroom, some of which I've never even spoken to before. That was powerful. That was magical. That was impressive and amazing. Because deep down inside, they all know that there's something not quite right. But they've never seen a man really stand up with conviction and fight like hell for what's right, just, and fair. What's true and what truly is the law. And they were enamored by it. Some may have great disdain for me for it. Some may say I should have gone along to get along. That's not the point. The point is they still left their homes to be down there and lay witness with their own eyes to a crucifixion of an innocent man. No different than Jesus' trials. An innocent man. All those people gathered. Some had piss poor opinions of him. Others were emotionally distraught about watching an innocent man be laid to waste, right? So the power is within your community. The counties existed long before the states did. The counties were some of the first things ever developed. The power is within the county. The power is within the community. That's how you change your trajectory in your community, is by creating a positive energy and a place for people to start to open their mind and think. How do we change it? How do we better ourselves? We take control. Government was never supposed to have control. They were there to protect our rights as we engaged in fair trade and even exchanged amongst each other. And should a dispute arise out of it, the government would come in and evaluate the situation blindly, looking at the law and nothing more than the law. And now what we have is a bunch of incompetence on both ends. And they're manipulating the situation for profit and gain. And you're the one that's being used. So thanks for joining me this evening. We'll get one more. There's another maxim in here. Like I said, these books have thousands of them. And these were just some of the better ones that have been pulled out. In default of the law, the maximum rules. In default of the law, the maximum rules. All right? Every man is presumed innocent until he is proved to the contrary. Where you doubt, do nothing. All right? Where you doubt, do more research. Don't just do nothing. Do more research. All right? Don't be afraid to experiment. The founding fathers were willing to give their life on a theory, on an experiment. They give up their fortunes. They give up their families. They moved halfway around the world. And they were labeled as tyrants, treasonous rat bastards. They had prices on their heads. Don't be afraid to do things in good faith with good conscience for good reason. All right? Just make sure your heart's in the right spot when you're doing it. Money refused liberates the debtor. Well, that defines or depends on what species we're speaking of, doesn't it? Money refused liberates the debtor. If a promissory note creates a debt, is it not also true that a promissory note or a letter of credit can pay the debt? I'm just thinking. I'm just trying to make you think. Let the principle answer. It is miserable state of things where the law is vague and uncertain. The necessity of proving is always incumbent upon him who acts. The presumption is always in favor of the one who denies. Why is that? Because the one who brought the claim has the onus of probandi to prove, and the presumption shall always be in the favor of the one who denies. A presumption shall stand until the contrary is proved. Witnesses cannot witness to a negative. They must witness to an affirmative. All right? The rule is that ignorance of the law does not excuse, but that ignorance of a fact may excuse a party from the legal consequences of his conduct. That one's going to throw you for a loop. The rule is that ignorance of the law does not excuse, but that ignorance of a fact may excuse a party from the legal consequences of his conduct. What are we talking about there? False and deceptive trade practices. We're talking about false and misleading documentations or forms, right? If you didn't know the fact was absent, they didn't tell you you had a right of rescission, are you going to be held by legal consequences? If you're not learned, perhaps. If you're silent and you acquiesce, more than likely. But if you know this maxim right here, the rule is that ignorance of the law does not excuse, but that ignorance of a fact may excuse a party from a legal consequence of his conduct. It was my intent to enter into this contract, however, they failed to disclose, and through their false and misleading deceptive trade practices have provided me a remedy. A remedy to be made whole, which means everything that I've ever given to them they have to give back, because part of a contract is the quid pro quo. You get, I get. That's called value and consideration. Without value and consideration, you don't have a contract. Most people say that contracts are void. What they're not comprehending is they're voidable. Voidable means you have to prove why they're void. I hear all these gurus. Oh, that's void. That's a void contract. Stop. Stop doing your fellow friends and family a disservice. It's voidable based upon the facts that you can prove that full disclosure was not had. That's a denial of due process of law, making it void. But you have to prove it first. It's just merely voidable. It's not void. Because remember, equity doesn't aid a volunteer. And if you're going along to get along and you ain't paying attention and you fulfill the obligation, where's your right to redress and grievance? Obviously, you didn't see a problem with it. Long sufferance is equated to acquiescence. You fulfilled the contract. You got what you wanted. They got what they wanted. Now you want to create controversy? You see what I'm saying? It pays to be learned. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know it all. I am not the end-all, be-all for you guys. All I can do is plant some seeds. I'm not even sure what my purpose is here, but I feel compelled to share with you what I'm learning at a level that would blow most legal scholars and lawyers out of the water. There aren't a whole lot of lawyers that want to go toe-to-toe with me. And I don't even want controversy with them. I don't want to be combative with them. But I would like to engage in articulate conversation. There are some that I do, but many of them are very skittish because they know the contempt that I have for their profession, which is nothing more than lying, looting, thieving, pandering pieces of shit. Because there is no way that they paid $180,000 for school and haven't caught on to what's really going on. There's just no way. It's not plausible. You would have to literally have your head up somebody else's ass in order not to see what's really happening. You would have to be that ignorant, that's scary. It's very dangerous to know that it's plausible that they really are just that ignorant. Placating around that they're the most intelligent people around. They run the world. No, they screw people throughout the world. Out of their hard earnings, their sweat equity, their property, their real estate. They're giving it to you. All right? He who errs does not consent. The reference is not to be credited unless the thing referred to be proved. It is not proper to surrender the person of men when no cause is shown. Has there been a cause of action shown when the state brings a claim against you? You're going to have to decide that one for yourself. I know that if I can't punch Santa Claus in the face, I damn sure can't punch the state in the face. There is no victim. Now you're going to have to prove that I entered into an international contract knowingly, willingly, and intentionally, and full disclosure was had. I'll talk about the DMV, the IRS, any of them, all of them. They're going to have to prove that they provided full disclosure. And trust me, I'm going to rely on who, what, when, where, why, and how the entire time until I decimate them. I'm going to be like that 5-year-old kid that's just annoying as all get out. But now that I look at it, I appreciate them so much. Because they reminded me about the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Why does the bee fly? Okay, but what's it fly for? And when it gets on that flower, why is it doing that? And where does it go? And when was it born? You see, those little kids can teach us so much. They can bring us back home to where we're supposed to be, which is always asking questions. Our founding fathers were discoverers, right? They didn't know anything. They discovered things. And then they reported back what they discovered. Their only task throughout this life was to make an observation, create a record, report it. And that helped prevent us. Hold on. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Check this out. I don't know if you guys can hear me because of the phone ringing, so I'm just going to give it a minute until it stops ringing because people like to call me while I'm doing lives. 97 strong here tonight. You guys, thanks for joining me. It's been a blessing. I just got a few more maxims if you want to hang out. I can hear you. Okay, you can hear me. We're going to keep rocking and rolling then. He who does not defend himself when present is considered as submitting. He who does not defend himself when present is considered as submitting. Okay? That silence is acquiescence. The presence of the body waves the air in the name. All right? It is not law but servitude to be held by what we have not consented to. It is not law, but servitude to be held by what we have not consented to. There is no rule which may not fail. Names of things should be understood according to the common usage, not according to the opinions of individuals. You still want to be in common law? Where you're getting the opinions of individuals and what they think and what they perceive and what they believe? It's another reason you're not supposed to be abbreviating anything, because you allow people to presume and assume. The U.S. may mean to me that you understand. Thank you very much for granting me jurisdiction. I'm allowed to presume and assume in the public venue, right? Because everything is presumption and assumption. There are two things that will never be tried in a public venue. You want to know what they are? This will blow your frickin' mind. Facts and the law. Because the truth can't be in their venue. If the private side was in their venue would just be demolished. So there's two things in their military style venues that won't ever be challenged, looked at, or judged. That's the law, right? And facts. They'll never be tried, ever. There's no rule which may not fail. Things should be judged by laws, not by examples. You are not to do evil that good may come of it. Remember how I keep telling you guys, you don't harvest the grapes after they've rotted and decayed and set them on your countertop and watch them turn into voluptuous, ripe grapes, right? So from evil, no good can manifest. Okay, that's just a visual for you guys. But from good, manifest evil. From good deeds, most often leads to something that can be manifested that's evil. Okay, people get power, they start to get hungry, it's never enough, and all of a sudden evil starts to grow. And I'm not just talking about politics or finances necessarily. There are other instances where from good manifest evil. All right, it's not it can never be from evil comes good. If you rob your neighbor to feed the kids down the block, just because what you did was put food in their bellies, and although it's admirable, the way you went about it was wrong, and thus no good can come of it. I hope you understand that. The necessity of proving possession of his own property is not incumbent upon the owner. Not what is said, but what is done is to be regarded. The meaning of a word may be ascertained by reference to the meaning of words associated with it. A naked contract is where there is no consideration to support the agreement, but where there is a consideration, an obligation exists and produces an action. All right, this is going to be your contract maxim right here. A naked contract is where there is no consideration to support the agreement, but where there is a consideration, an obligation does exist and produces an action. Okay? No impossible or dishonest thing are to be presumed, but things true, honorable, and possible. The authority of no man ought to prevail with us, so that we should not follow better opinions should another present them. Always keep your mind open. I don't know everything. I've been through my trials and tribulations. I'm certain I'll go through more. And every time I go through something, I will testify with firsthand knowledge as to what transpired to the best of my ability to convey it to you to help you ascend. That's why I put myself in harm's way when I go to their synagogues. Their synagogues are absolutely rancid with evildoers and with people who are violating others' rights. It's really, really, really sad when you walk into those courthouses, and it should make you feel elated knowing that justice is being served. But in truth, when you know the truth, walking into that building feels filthy. It feels disgusting, because what they're doing is the furthest thing from honorable. All right? While they hide and masquerade behind titles of nobility such as honorable. The authority of no man ought to prevail with us, so that we should not follow better opinions, should another present them. No medicine is the same to all. No man can forfeit the rights or the right of another. That's so important. No man can forfeit the right of another. Things abandoned become the property of the occupant. Ladies and gentlemen, I've told you that we are under military occupation, and everything you're doing is abandoning your securities, abandoning your rights, titles, interests, dividends, derivatives, hediments, general tangibles, general intangibles, chattel securities, baggage effects, trust residue, and trust residuals. You're abandoning all of that because you lack the knowledge, and my people shall suffer for their lack of knowledge. My people shall suffer for their lack of knowledge. You're abandoning your assets. You're abandoning your estate. You are an heir to this estate that I speak of. All right? You have power that is so unbelievable. And then you have to learn how to be humble about it and how to show your neighbors that they can do the same. All right? Thank you for joining me this evening. It's been a blessing. As always, I thank you so much. Check out selfgovernanceu.com. It helps support me, keep doing free videos and things like that. Thanks to the people who support selfgovernanceu.com for giving me the ability to reach 87 people this evening. I really appreciate you guys. And without you guys, I couldn't do this. I do have a class coming up. Again, I keep talking about it. It's just to get you guys ready. For members of Self-Governance U, it's $100. All my classes for members of Self-Governance U, whether I do them for 15 hours straight or 5-hour classes, they're always going to be $100. Okay? For non-members, they're going to be $300. So get yourself signed up with Self-Governance U. Here in a couple days, I'm going to announce when the class is. It's going to be put 3 weeks out to give everybody time. And I'm literally going to show you the steps that you can take to cancel debt, to eviscerate the contract, to rescind everything. Okay? And I'm going to show you why you can do it, why it's not theft. I'm going to show you how powerful you are and the transaction that you actually engaged in, what it was, and where they were deceitful, and why you have remedy. Why you have remedy. And we've done it 3 times now, and it's no longer a fluke. We didn't just get lucky. I'm not bringing this to you after we did it once, going, oh man, we got to figure it out. No, we did it 3 times. 3 different scenarios. Credit card, mortgage, car note. 3 times. And it works like a charm. So think of how much that can help you in the long run. And it is work. Don't get me wrong. It may be frustrating. Different states may have different things that we'll have to navigate around together. But together, this process can be executed flawlessly because the FDCPA and Title 15 lords over all of them. And if they want to give us any flack, your buddy over here knows how to contact the SEC, the FTC, and the IRS. We'll get them. We'll sit the big demons on the little demons, and the little demons will cower and send you a letter of satisfaction like they should have when they launched your note without your consent, when they gave your private intellectual property to a third-party intervener that had no business with you and no contract. Oh yes, we've learned it. We practice it, we preach it, we teach it to help you and yours. So thanks again for joining me. Look forward to seeing you at selfgovernanceu.com. That's where we'll announce the class. And I'll put the button for the class. It hasn't been manifested or created yet. It's coming. But thanks again for all your time. We'll see you soon.